Philadelphia, a city that once stood as a beacon of freedom and opportunity. But today, it tells a very different story. On one side, gleaming skyscrapers and lively cafes paint a picture of progress. Yet, just a few blocks away, entire neighborhoods struggle in the shadows, weighed down by hardship. How did this happen? How did a city so deeply tied to the American dream become one of the most challenged urban centers in the nation? From the gripping opioid crisis affecting families to the rising homelessness crisis, this is the hidden struggle of Philadelphia. Stay with us because what you're about to discover might completely change how you see this historic city. Philadelphia, a city once brimming with pride. Known for its legacy of freedom, it was the birthplace of a young nation. The Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, these were more than landmarks. They were symbols of America's fight for independence. And who could forget the legendary Rocky Steps? Every determined stride, every swing of a fist, embodied the relentless spirit of those willing to push forward, chasing the dream of a better life. But today, that dream feels like a distant memory. Walk through Center City, and you'll see the modern face of Philadelphia. Glass towers rise beside historic buildings. Trendy cafes and restaurants now stand where factories once echoed with the sound of industry. The surface glows with progress. It looks like a city on the rise. But take a closer look, and the cracks begin to show. Beneath its polished exterior, Philadelphia is still struggling, weighed down by wounds of the past. And then, there's Kensington Avenue. This is where the city's pulse weakens. Nowhere else does the divide between Philadelphia's past greatness and present troubles stand in such stark contrast. Kensington, a name once tied to hard work and family life, is now a symbol of struggle, addiction, and neglect. It was a neighborhood full of life, where communities thrived. Today, it's a place where the past lingers in the shadows, casting a dark cloud over its future. But how did things get this bad? How did a city once defined by resilience and progress find itself in decline? Stay with us because the answers are coming up next. Walking through the streets of Philadelphia today, it's almost impossible to imagine that this city was once the beating heart of America's industrial power. Factories roared with life, filled with workers moving in perfect rhythm, like bees in a thriving hive. Philadelphia wasn't just a city, it was a machine of progress, a powerhouse producing textiles, metal, paper, and everything needed to fuel a booming nation. But as history has shown time and time again, no golden age lasts forever. By the late 20th century, a massive shift was underway, and Philadelphia, the industrial giant, was left behind. Globalization changed the game. One by one, factories shut their doors as companies moved production overseas in search of cheaper labor. The jobs that had supported generations vanished overnight. The skyline evolved, but the economic heart of the city? It had stopped beating. What remained were empty warehouses, broken promises, and a city struggling to keep pace with a rapidly changing world. The fallout from deindustrialization was swift and brutal. Once a hub of opportunity, Philadelphia was now drowning in unemployment and rising poverty. A stark divide emerged. In Center City, modern skyscrapers rose above bustling streets, lined with high-end real estate and an endless stream of tourists. But just beyond the glimmering downtown, neighborhoods like Kensington, a place that once pulsed with life, became forgotten wastelands, where poverty, crime, and addiction spread like wildfire. Which is the greater tragedy, the collapse of a once mighty industrial empire, or the way the city's wealth became locked away in one small district? Have you seen this pattern elsewhere, maybe in places you visited? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This divide between a wealthy, polished core and the struggling neighborhoods that surround it is the reality of Philadelphia today. The city's prosperity now belongs to a select few, while the rest are left to fight for survival. But how did a city that was once one of the richest in history become the poorest major city in the United States? That's the question we'll uncover in the next chapter. With 23% of the population living below the poverty line, the divide between wealth and hardship in Philadelphia isn't just visible, it's impossible to ignore. Nearly 1 in 10 residents struggle in extreme poverty. But these aren't just numbers. They represent real people, families waking up each day to a battle for survival. You can see it in the neighborhoods where children play on cracked sidewalks, where families stand in line at food pantries just to make it through another week. It's in the exhausted eyes of parents juggling multiple jobs, doing everything they can to keep a roof over their heads. While the city center thrives, filled with towering buildings, lively cafes, and luxury apartments, the outer districts tell a very different story. On one side, the streets are spotless, polished, and full of life. But just beyond, you'll find broken roads, boarded-up houses, and schools that have been left in disrepair. Philadelphia's grand, historic architecture still stands, but in many places it is overshadowed by a harsh reality of neglect and decay. You can feel the shift as you move through these areas. The air seems heavier. The silence speaks louder. It's as if the city itself acknowledges which parts have been forgotten. Poverty isn't just about a lack of money, it's about the absence of opportunity. Schools are overcrowded, resources are scarce, and many children grow up believing there's no way out. The cycle continues, trapping families in a struggle that feels impossible to escape. In places like Kensington, where poverty and addiction collide, the struggle is even more intense. People here aren't just trying to live, they're fighting to survive. For many, hope feels like a distant dream, something that belongs to another world entirely. This is the side of Philadelphia that few outsiders see, but for thousands, it's a daily reality. Nowadays, the name Kensington is tied to a disturbing trend: depression tourism. But why has this phenomenon emerged? Before we uncover the reason, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell below. It helps us reach more people and continue sharing these untold stories. Thank you, best of followers. Picture a street where drug users drift like shadows, sitting in a daze, barely aware of the world around them. The air is heavy with the scent of neglect, and trash piles up in every corner. It's a place that feels abandoned not by the people who live there, but by the city itself. The buildings stand in disrepair, windows shattered, their facades telling a story of a place long forgotten. The people here? They remain caught in a neighborhood that was once thriving but has now become a symbol of hopelessness. This is Kensington. Once a lively hub filled with families and workers, Kensington has become a place known for destruction. Fentanyl, heroin, and now xylazine have transformed the area into something almost unrecognizable. The sidewalks are lined with those who have overdosed, their bodies lifeless as the world moves around them. In the year 2022, the opioid crisis took more than 100,000 lives across the country. In Philadelphia, especially Kensington, has become one of the hardest hit areas. Every single day, people overdose, yet the city's response is nearly invisible. Shelters are overflowing, resources are scarce, and for many, help is simply out of reach. Even for those who have lived here their entire lives, the scene is disturbing. There is no urgency, no visible effort to turn things around. It feels as if the city has turned its back on Kensington, leaving residents with little hope. For those trapped in addiction, the cycle is relentless, with no easy escape. In Kensington, people of all ages live under the constant shadow of danger, knowing that every day could be their last. And for those who have the means to leave, they do. But for many, there is no way out. What do you think? Should cities step in more aggressively to fix places like Kensington? Or is it already too late? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But the truth behind Kensington's decline runs deeper than most realize. This isn't just about drugs or crime, it's part of a much bigger issue. Stay tuned as we uncover the full story. The streets of Kensington have become a war zone, a place where an unseen battle rages on. Philadelphia now finds itself at the epicenter of this crisis, one that didn't appear overnight but crept in slowly, fueled by the widespread prescription of painkillers. For years, doctors handed out opioids without fully understanding the consequences. What was meant to bring relief instead sparked an addiction epidemic that would consume entire communities. What started in a doctor's office soon spiraled into a full-blown crisis, pulling countless people into its grip. But the nightmare didn't stop there. It got far worse. The rise of fentanyl has pushed this crisis into terrifying new territory. In the year 2022 alone, nearly 110,000 lives were lost to overdoses across the country. Fentanyl played a role in almost 2/3 of those deaths. This synthetic drug is up to 50 times stronger than heroin and even more potent than morphine. But Philadelphia, especially Kensington, is now facing an even deadlier threat, a substance known as xylazine. Xylazine is a powerful animal tranquilizer, never intended for human use. Yet, it's being mixed with fentanyl and heroin, creating a lethal cocktail that's ravaging the streets. This isn't just another wave of the drug crisis, it's a full-scale public health catastrophe. And this isn't just about a handful of bad choices. It's about an entire neighborhood, an entire city, being consumed by an addiction crisis that refuses to slow down. These aren't rare tragedies, they happen every single day. Overdoses, desperation, and devastation unfold in broad daylight, and the worst part, real solutions seem out of reach. Families are being torn apart, lives shattered, and entire communities left to pick up the pieces. Philadelphia, once a beacon of freedom and resilience, is now drowning in a crisis that seems impossible to overcome. But how did a city that once symbolized American strength fall into such despair? To understand, we have to look at the deeper failures, the economic, social, and political systems that allowed this disaster to grow unchecked. Stay with us, because what you're about to learn next is even more shocking. As Kensington collapses under the weight of addiction and economic decline, a new kind of homelessness emerges, a growing population of people who never had a fair chance. Families are being forced out of their homes, left to survive on the streets with nowhere to turn. When all hope is lost, everything they once built disappears. In this harsh reality, survival becomes the only goal, and the dignity of life slowly fades away. You can't miss them. Tents line the sidewalks, makeshift shelters pop up in every corner. People sleep on cold pavement, struggling to shield themselves from the elements. This is the face of homelessness in Philadelphia. And it's not just adults. Children, the elderly, entire families, people who once had stable lives now find themselves scattered across the city, exposed and vulnerable, as the very systems meant to protect them fail. Philadelphia, once a symbol of opportunity and freedom, now holds one of the highest homelessness rates in the nation. According to the latest data from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, more than 5,000 people are homeless on any given night. But the true scale of the crisis is likely even greater. Shelters are full, resources are scarce, and the safety nets meant to help are unraveling. Too few beds, too many people in need. Those who once had a place to call home now sleep in parks, alleys, or the very streets they once walked freely. It's devastating. Many have no choice but to adapt to the brutal realities of life outside. The city's response has been slow, and while shelters exist, they fall short. Rules at many shelters make it impossible for families to stay together. Some refuse pets, others enforce curfews that make daily survival even harder. In fact, nearly 1/3 of Philadelphia's homeless population consists of families with children. These families face obstacles that seem impossible to overcome: skyrocketing housing costs, limited access to mental health care, and unemployment rates that have soared, especially in struggling areas like Kensington, where the job market has all but vanished. The growing crisis of homelessness in Philadelphia has led to various attempts by the government to address the problem. But in reality, many of these efforts have been little more than short-term fixes, temporary solutions that cover the surface but fail to address the deeper issues. Over the years, the city has launched different initiatives, from police crackdowns to community outreach and cleanup operations. While these programs are often praised for reducing crime and curbing substance abuse, they are merely band-aids on a much deeper wound, quick fixes that do nothing to solve the real problem. Take police operations, for example. Officers have conducted sweeps to target street dealers and remove addicts from areas like Kensington Avenue. And while the city has managed to clear certain streets, the issue hasn't disappeared. It hasn't even lessened. The problem has simply shifted elsewhere. A few blocks away, the same struggles continue, hidden from public view. These cleanup efforts only push the crisis into the shadows, relocating it rather than solving it. The truth is, these measures offer nothing more than a brief pause. For every dealer arrested and every tent removed, new ones appear in different parts of the city, keeping the cycle alive. The neighborhoods struggling with addiction, crime, and poverty continue to suffer, while deeper solutions remain out of reach. Philadelphia's problems are too deeply rooted for quick fixes to make a lasting difference. The city has also introduced community outreach programs aiming to provide better mental health services, job training, and rehabilitation opportunities. These programs were designed to create long-term change, but they often lack the funding or support needed to be truly effective. Shelters remain overcrowded, mental health services are overwhelmed, and many people who desperately need help simply cannot access it. So why have these efforts failed? Why do the problems persist despite the resources and work put into solving them? The answer is simple: none of these actions have addressed the real root causes. A severe lack of affordable housing, a struggling economy, and deep social inequality remain untouched. Until these core issues are confronted, the crisis will only continue to repeat itself. In the year 2024, Philadelphia's government made a dramatic announcement, a large-scale cleanup operation targeting the heart of the crisis, Kensington Avenue. It was presented as a bold step forward, an effort to reclaim the streets and restore order. Tents were dismantled, drug dealers were arrested, and sidewalks were cleared. But like so many previous efforts, this operation seemed more like a temporary show for the public rather than a real solution. The media covered it extensively. News stations broadcast footage of police clearing the streets, while officials praised the effort as a turning point for the city. For a brief moment, it looked as if real change was finally happening. The streets seemed cleaner, the usual scenes of despair momentarily pushed out of sight. But once the cameras stopped rolling and public attention shifted, the reality remained the same. This so-called cleanup? It was a spectacle. A short-lived display of action that did little to address the deeper issues. While the sidewalks were swept and the encampments removed, the people affected didn't simply vanish. They were still there, just forced into different parts of the city, out of view. The same struggles, homelessness, addiction, poverty remained as present as ever, only now pushed further into the shadows. Within days, familiar problems returned to the areas that had been temporarily cleared. The operation may have removed some visible signs of distress, but the underlying crisis was untouched. Substance abuse, mental health struggles, and economic hardship continued to grip Kensington and beyond. While the cleanup was a step forward in some ways, it was nowhere near the lasting change the city desperately needed. Philadelphia remains in the grip of deep-rooted challenges, and for many of its residents, daily life is still a struggle. Short-term fixes may offer brief relief, but they do not solve the real problems. However, there are individuals and organizations working tirelessly to break the cycle, offering hope, support, and a path toward a better future. Philadelphia, once known as the city of brotherly love, a symbol of freedom and opportunity, now stands at a crossroads. Built on the ideals of independence, it was meant to be a place where anyone could thrive, a city of promise. But today it seems to have turned its back on the very people it was meant to protect. The streets still carry the echoes of the Declaration of Independence and the Liberty Bell, yet for many living here now, those ideals feel like a distant memory. The contrast is impossible to ignore. On one side, gleaming skyscrapers and bustling tourist districts showcase a thriving metropolis. On the other, entire neighborhoods have been left behind, places where poverty, crime, and addiction have taken hold. The stark divide between the Philadelphia of history and the Philadelphia of today leaves a troubling question. What went wrong? How did a city that once stood for hope and resilience fall into such deep despair? Philadelphia's past still lingers, but its future remains uncertain. The cleanups, the arrests, the quick fixes, they've all failed to bring lasting change. The people of Kensington, the homeless families, those battling addiction, they have not disappeared. They are still here, still struggling, still waiting for a solution that never seems to come. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Click on the video that appears on your screen right now. I'm sure you'll love this content. Comment below about the next country you want to see featured on our channel. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video. Thanks for joining us. Leave a comment, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting videos. See you in the next video.